since long before I was born, my country has been deeply divided. In many ways, it's the thing South Africa's most famous for, the ugly apartheid policy that separates people according to their race. And then, of course, assigns the opportunities for work and wealth creation according to color. That officially ended, about 25 years ago, but the inequality, the division, and the conflict are still with us very much to this day. And that creates an enormous responsibility on anybody living and working in South Africa to find some way to create a better life for all of us, while working with and addressing the inequality, the pain, the conflict. For me particularly, I think, given that the color of my skin put me on the top of the pile, gave me enormous privileges, and of course with that enormous responsibility to use my privileges for the better of this society. And that's really been the story of my whole life. Into that came ORSC about 5 years ago. For a while before that, I'd been working as a leadership coach, really supporting people in all kinds of different walks of life to bring about the change that's needed. But I more and more realized that individual leadership is kind of a contradiction in terms. Leadership is all about bringing change with people and through people. So ORSC was a godsend. I was particularly inspired by Yuri Murikawa, whom I met at an ORSC global conference about 5 years ago in Barcelona. And we talked about how do we work with this kind of methodology in countries like ours, where there's lots of questions about the collective and the individual. Different but similar, I think, between Africa and Japan. And how do we work with bringing our countries out of poverty in a good way that really serves the people as well as the rest of the world? I got excited by that. I was amazed at what you had done in CRR Japan. Then it had been about 5 years for you. And I kind of said, I want to be like you in 5 years' time. And I'm very grateful to say that inspiration made a huge difference. Of course, when I went home, what I found was I needed a business plan for this. And I think it's an interesting business as well as a social story, because it's about how do you create a business that does create wealth for the people running the business, for the customers of the business, and for their customers. How do you create wealth, and how do you at the same time take action on the systemic problems in the very society that you're doing business in? For us, the business plan had to start then with customers across all the divisions of our society. So customers from business, traditionally the place that has money and resources of that sort. Customers from the public sector, which in South Africa is very complicated. The government has this history of driving apartheid. Now it's the new government that has this huge burden of bringing about change at the speed of light, and really doesn't have all the resources it needs. Customers from the communities that have always been downtrodden by all the problems that we're speaking about. And the people in those communities whose great gift is the passion to help their brothers and sisters to rise up, to recover from the wounds of the past and the present. So that was the kind of business customer plan, was to serve all sectors of our society. Also to address the inequalities in the coaching community of South Africa, where most coaches look like me. Coaches often are perhaps chosen to be models of what success looks like in your society, and white people tended to be the ones who had the wealth and the opportunity. So So a coach training business has to address that and bring in people who look and behave and think and live differently to the old elite. And even more than that, we that are getting the privilege of this training need to be people who are addressing change at all sectors of society. So that was the challenge. The pleasure of the work over the last 5 years has been to find allies across all those sectors, to find business people who really see that operating their businesses in a way that creates change is good for business and good for society, to meet people who are passionate about bringing about change in the public sector, to meet and serve people who are coming from really the most impoverished communities of our country and are busy rebuilding those communities. And I want to introduce you to some of our partners and let you hear a bit of their lives in their own words. These are the people who did the ORSC training in the very first cohort. One of their trainers was this very same Yuri Murikawa, who trained with me and who took ORSC into a wide range of different applications right across the board. The New Leaders Foundation is a fabulous South African organization set up to address the education crisis in our country. You may know that a lot of the way apartheid was set in stone was through discrimination in education. Fixing that is more than a lifetime's work. And one of the directors and several of the key staff of the New Leaders Foundation did the ORSC training back in 2013 and 2014 and became stalwarts of working systems change in education using ORSC.
When we listen to the reports about South Africa, or the bad news, we know that unless we get education, health, safety and security, and municipalities right, public sector right, our country is heading in a direction that none of us even want to conceive. So the big dream for the New Leaders Foundation is to work with public sector management, and we've started in education because we know that if we work in education, in 30 years' time, we will have the leadership, the active citizenship that's needed to sail this boat.
So we've chosen to work in education at a systems level. So the work that we're doing is systems change. And what the ORSC process brings is a direct methodology around how to do that.
I think the depth that ORSC has given us is the actual tangible language of it. Because I think even though we were working in the organization relationship system, we didn't have the language of how you actually work with that and work with the invisible. Whereas actually when you're doing relationship systems coaching, you say go and work with the invisible.
PAPAMA Initiatives is a community-based non-governmental organization based in Soweto, run by Sowetans, and really serving people in that community, bringing about the opportunity for the community to create wealth for itself and create opportunities for the youth, many of whom really struggle.
Our work has taken us into large-scale community conflicts in the context of this country.
That involves actually working with different partnerships that are based on community development, where a lot of investments by government, by big development agencies are working together with the community.
Deliver Naledi is a small non-governmental organization founded by one of the stalwarts of the ORSC community. She really set about focusing on girls and, as she says, giving them the opportunities that she didn't have growing up in South Africa.
I believe that there's a reason why I chose to come to this world at this time, and in the color of skin that I'm in. There's a lot of work that I'm supposed to do. In 2008, when I started to follow the journey of coaching, my biggest passion was to inspire young people, and so I founded an NGO called Deliver Naledi. And we worked in schools, we worked with grade 10s up to grade 12s, and we would do some coaching, and we would do some life skills, leadership skills, and created something that I needed when I was a child, that I lacked. So what Deliver became, it became exactly that. It gave the youth the way to say that even if you don't have parents or whatever, you can still have dreams and aspire to get out of where you are. All you need is to have a solid plan, and
there's a lot of change that can be done. And also giving the people in the system the voice, because you can imagine young boys cannot really speak up. In our culture, you were taught not to speak up to another the way you want to, but just interacting through these tools that we got from us, I'm imagining them having the power to voice out things. Myself, I feel I got my voice back. Really, I was just saying on weekend, wow, I've got my voice back. And
getting this to work, as you can imagine, requires quite a complex funding model. Clearly, there's fee income if you're training people in ORSC. Everybody pays to get this wonderful training. But when your market is radically different in terms of the financial resources, what we needed to create, first of all, was a very strong program of scholarships and discounts, so that those people who work in markets that are economically challenged pay less for their training than those who work in more commercial markets. Secondly, we started a crowdfunding initiative to which people contributed from all over the world, including a wonderfully large contribution from CRR Japan. Also, beyond the crowdfunding, there's a institution level support from the global ORSC community, led by CRR Global. The biggest contribution they made was to bring ORSC certification to South Africa 3 years ago, and really bring the advanced skills to the kind of pioneers who you've just seen on video. Most of them were members of what we call the Elephant Cohort, the first ORSC certification in South Africa. And finally, we also raised money locally, particularly those of us, including myself, who do a lot of our work in the corporate business sector, and we're therefore able to earn good fees from our systems coaching. We created a voluntary system of contributing 5% of the income we earned from our corporate clients towards the South African Scholarship Fund. So it's worked. Nearly 500 people have had some ORSC training. About 100 of those have completed the advanced training, and about 25 of those have completed certification so far. And we're busy fundraising for the next round of South African certification, due to happen this year in 2018. The outlook for this thing, I think, is important and interesting and keeps me inspired, because I think the kind of business problem I've just outlined to you, the little tiny small business of developing ORSC in South Africa, is a small example of what businesses throughout our country, and I think across the world, are facing. I think any business today has to invest in the society that it operates in. It's kind of obvious today that if we don't do something about the difficulty, the division, the inequality, the conflict in our world, there's not going to be a society or a market in which any business can operate and thrive. So I think business is kind of getting that. Certainly our business customers in South Africa are getting that. And they're turning to ORSC because they're saying, wow, for us to lead in such a chaotic, ambiguous, uncertain, volatile world as this, and in such a divided and conflict-ridden world as this, for us to create value, to create wealth, to create opportunity in that kind of a world, we need to have real skill in navigating change. We need to have real skill in embracing conflict and building from conflict and creating from conflict. We have to have real skill in hearing all the voices of a very diverse workforce and creating the kind of conditions where everybody feels not just allowed but actually welcome and fully at home and belonging in the workplace and in the society. ORSC really helps with that. And ORSC practitioners are finding their home and finding their work in the business sector, in the public sector, in the community sector, and in families. And I think business is kind of, more businesses are getting it, that the bottom line is more than the traditional financial bottom line. It's what we've been talking about for years, the triple bottom line. Making financial wealth for not just the shareholders but also the people who work in it. Making an impact not just on the lives of the people who work in the business but on the communities they operate in. And making a difference to our whole planet. As people adopt that kind of approach, it changes everything. And it creates enormous opportunities for us as systems practitioners with real skills and real tools to offer businesses and societies grappling with that kind of future.